Thank you, Ed. That was very generous of you. Yesterday, I got a phone call from one of my 4 sons, and he told me an incredible story. A friend of his from college on the swim team is also a medical doctor, and Andy Storm is his name. He was driving down the road in Philadelphia this summer, and all of a sudden, a car coming the opposite way in front of him took a right turn and went into a canal. The car disappeared under the water, and Andy was there. It pulled over, somebody else pulled over, and Andy made the quick decision on what to do. He jumped in the water. The car was under 6 feet of water. Andy happened to have a knife with him because he was in the process of moving, and he needed that to box up things, that type of stuff. He's also an experienced kayaker who, when you're kayaking, you carry a knife for emergency situations. So Andy made the decision that he went under the water and used the knife to cut the seat belt. Thankfully, the windows were open when the car went under the water, so the car was filled up with water. Otherwise, the person in there probably would have drowned. So then Andy had to get this rather large individual out of the car. And the only way he could do it was by standing on top of the car, completely underwater, crouching down, reaching in here into the window and grabbing this guy by the shoulders and pulling him out after doing the maneuver of cutting the seatbelt. Turned out the guy was a policeman. He had had a heart attack, and Andy got him to the shore, revived him, and the guy survived. The reason I tell you that story is because I'm going to talk to you about personal injury situations, and it may be that it's not the type of thing that you think you would encounter. You may have employees in a business that may encounter situations like this, not like Andy's situation, hopefully, but the documenting things is so important in any personal injury case or in any business transaction. And I look at this cell phone as the knife that Andy Storm had on him when he saved this guy's life. If he didn't have that knife, he would not have been able to save that guy. And the reason I say that about a cell phone is I represent and have represented over the years many people in auto accidents. And so often people get into accidents and they claim that, or their position is that they're not at fault, the other driver is at fault. Then when it comes time to talk to a policeman, the policeman tends to separate the two people in an accident, so he wants to hear the stories separately. The person that hits you in an accident that you think, well, there's no question here. They're at fault, and I'll just run everything through their insurance company. There'll be no issues there at all. All of a sudden, things start to change when the other driver starts to talk to the policeman and comes up with the story that, well, I did rear end the car in front of me, but the only reason I did is because they stopped suddenly for no reason. That's just an example of, I see that fairly often, as a matter of fact. And your knife, your cell phone there, is a very important tool that you can use in situations of any accident situations. You want to take pictures of the damage not only to your car, but of the other car from several different angles. You want to document any injuries that you have. It's very important to do that. The policeman is there, he's there to do a job, but this is one of maybe 20 accidents he's going to handle that day. And they want to get in, they want to get out, they don't want to minimize the paperwork that they have to go through, so they're not necessarily getting all the details that you would want to have in an accident to be able to support your position on what happened. Witnesses, that is so important. If you're in a situation like this, you want to look around and see if there are any witnesses out there. You want to get their names, their addresses, and a couple of different contact phone numbers for them, so that somebody, if it turns out that you have to retain a lawyer, that you can pass this information on to the lawyer. This happened to me 2 weeks ago, as a matter of fact. This very situation where somebody else claimed that my client was at fault, and my client said, no, there's just no way. The policeman in the report really didn't take a position one way or the other, and my client luckily had gotten the statement or the contact information for an independent witness, not somebody in his car, somebody who happened to see this happen at a bus stop. And were it not for that, then my client would not have been compensated, whether it's for his injuries or for the damage to his car. If you have a lot of damage to your car typically is going to be towed. And I say avoid it at all costs. If you get your car towed to one of these tow yards, automatically there's $500 in fees. They won't release the car unless you pay the storage fees. And you're thinking, well, it's not my fault, I don't have to worry about this, but you should proceed with caution and make sure that if you can avoid getting your car towed, do it. If you got AAA, and if you can have them come to the scene and tow the car, you are so much better off doing it that way than allowing some tow yard to take your car away. Concerning documenting injuries, it's not just taking photographs of the damage to the cars. You need to tell paramedics, if they're on the scene, what problems you have, bruising or swelling. If you have dizziness, for example, which is one of the symptoms of a concussion, you need to tell the ambulance people that. You need to tell the emergency room doctors for two reasons. One is they need to know that information to properly treat you. The second thing is when it comes time to talk about potentially settling a case, if it's not documented, an adjuster for the insurance company, for the at-fault driver, typically takes the position, well, you may claim that now, but it's not in the medical records. And if it's not there, I'm not going to consider it. Your health insurance is really a big issue in this day and age of accident situations. I would say in 25% of the cases that I handle, the position of my client is, why should I use my insurance? I don't want to go through my car insurance. I don't want to use my health insurance. I don't want to have my premiums potentially raised. And I don't want to have my insurance canceled, typically car insurance they're talking about. But what they don't realize is on your insurance, first of all, you pay for it. And there are coverages on your insurance that can give you money that you would be entitled to no matter what. And it's kind of difficult to understand how these things overlay. So let me just walk you through. You have an accident, you go to the emergency room, your first reaction is, it's not my fault, I don't want to give them my health insurance information. If you don't give them the health insurance information at that point, and then later on it turns out that there is a problem, there is a question of liability, and you have to pay for the medical bill, going back to the hospital, giving them the health insurance information, and asking them to run it through your health insurance can be very problematic. Some health insurance policies have time limits, and there are sometimes very short time limits on submitting health information. So you should give them that information at the hospital, worry later on about whether it's going to be run through your health insurance or not, but you pay for it, use it. On your auto policy, you have something called, it's an optional coverage called medical expense coverage. That means if you or anybody in your vehicle is in an accident and they have an injury, no matter whose fault it is, you can use that to pay for medical bills up to the limit of the coverage. So if you have health insurance, you can take in Missouri, and this is allowed in Missouri, say an emergency room bill of $3,000. Your health insurance, it goes through your health insurance, they pay what they're going to pay. You can also take that same $3,000, submit it to your auto insurance company, and get paid the same amount of money for that medical bill. It doesn't go to the hospital, it goes to you. And you may say, well, why should I use that medical expense coverage on my policy? And my answer to clients who ask me that, I say, Well, if you're not going to use it, then don't pay for it. Don't have it on your policy. Why should you pay for something that you're not going to use? Personally, I have a high limit. Now, I see accidents all the time, and I'm always aware of things that can happen, so I have pretty high limits on things. My med pay expense, for example, is $25,000, and I've had that on many, many clients who have that much coverage, because you just never know what's going to happen. It's not really that expensive. It's something that you should always consider having with your insurance. And I'm not trying to sell insurance. I'm just giving you some pointers on things that you need to be aware of. The rental car, and this is also from personal experience. When you have the collision, your car is towed away, you need transportation. You got to get to a job. You don't want to lose your job. You've got appointments to go to. And you're thinking, well, the other side is going to put me in a rental car because it's not my fault. Insurance companies do not make quick decisions on cases. They aren't going to just go ahead and start paying money out on a case until they are absolutely sure that their client or their insured is at fault. Most of them are going to say, I am not going to make a decision on that until I get the police report. The policeman will tell you that here's the referral card, it has a police report number on it, it'll be ready in 7 days or so. It's going to take you sometimes 2 weeks to get the police report, and the same for the insurance company. So you got a 2-week window there of no transportation if you don't have another vehicle. And so you may have rental car coverage under your own policy. That's great. Use it if you have it. Again, you pay for it, so use it. But here's the problem with these things, or issues, I should say, not a problem, that if you go to a rental car company, whether it's coverage under your own policy or if the other insurance company says, we'll put you in a rental car, what they tell you is, or sometimes they don't even say it, we'll only give you up to $22, $23 a day. So it's going to be the lowest expense that you can have to get into a rental car. But there's another coverage there. You go to the rental car company and they say, well, do you have insurance? Sure, I got insurance. It'll cover everything. Well, let me sell you this other insurance, this insurance that costs $12 a day or $11 a day or something. They explain to you that if you're in an accident, what your insurance is not going to cover is loss of use of the vehicle. Meaning that if you're driving the rental car and you get in an accident, whether it's your fault or not, they can't use that vehicle to rent it out to somebody else, so they're losing income and they'll bill it back to you. You can, if you decide that you're going to get that extra insurance coverage that the rental car company sells you, the insurance company for the other driver is not going to pay you for that. That's going to come out of your own pocket. I have this happen probably 5 or 6 times a year, that there's this charge here that's going on that the other insurance company isn't going to pay for. And here's my personal experience with this, and something that will probably prompt you to go look at your credit card and what your credit card covers and doesn't cover. My wife years ago was in an accident down in New Orleans, and we had the situation where we were billed by the insurance company because of that loss of business use of the vehicle. And I thought we had coverage under our credit card. A lot of credit cards have an additional benefit to them that you oftentimes don't even realize, but not all credit cards, they're all different. So I made the claim with the credit card company and they said, no, it's not covered. So why not? Because the credit card is in your name, it's not in your wife's name. And I said, but we're both in the same family. They said, sorry, it's got to be in her name. It happened again 3 years ago. A different state, but we had somebody hit us while we were in a rental car. And when I rented the vehicle, first of all, I went back to the insurance, the credit card company, after that New Orleans incident, and I had them issue a second credit card in her name only. So now, at least I'm thinking, if she's driving, she's covered. If I'm driving, I'm covered. But that's only if the person who signed the insurance contract, the rental contract, is the one who was driving at the time of the incident. So 3 years ago, I said to Enterprise, I want you to put me on there, and I want you to put my wife as an additional driver. He said, oh, no, that's okay. That's not a problem. I said, that's okay. It is a problem for me. And I said, in a nice way, I said, we're going to write this in here, and I want you to initial it next to it. And I said, you know me, I'm just a lawyer. It's no, it's just a legal thing. And sure enough, we had that collision, and I got them to cover it, even though the card that we used was in my name and she was driving. I discussed it, let's say, didn't argue. I discussed it with the credit card company. It took a little bit of time, but I got them to agree that she was named as an additional driver. It's as if she had been the one, as if we had used her credit card to do it. So that's a coverage that you have under your credit card that you ought to look at, because you never know when situations like that are going to happen, especially if you're in a rental car. And the reason I say that is because you're typically in an area where you're not familiar with driving, and you don't know where bad areas are or are not. If you're in New York, I'd even advise maybe getting that extra $12 a day. The drivers are crazy out there. So that's a very important thing. Insurance adjuster, meaning the person who will contact you after an accident to determine fault, to determine if they agree that there is fault on their insured's part, then they're going to negotiate with you on the damage to your car and the amount of your, what's the value of your personal injuries. I always tell people the first contact with an insurance adjuster, they're going to ask you, can I take a statement from you? And I tell them right off the bat, don't give them a statement. Maybe they'll get a statement in a day or two, but the first thing you should do, just get their name, the name of the insurance company, the phone number, and claim number. And give me a call. We'll talk it over. We'll figure out if there are any problem areas that we need to talk about before you take that step, which is a very important step. Because they want to take your statement not because they want to pay you more money. They're trying to get things down as quick as possible so that if it turns out later on you're claiming, say, for example, injuries. And I've had this happen where a client gave a statement before they came to me who said when it came time to settle the personal injury part of it, my client had a concussion. And clear indication of concussion, dizziness, throwing up, that type of stuff. And it was in the emergency room records. But the adjuster said, well, when I talked to your insured, maybe the day after the accident, I asked them what problems they were having physically. They didn't mention that. And I had a long discussion / argument with the insurance adjuster about that in that case. Ultimately, I was successful, but they seize upon that statement, that initial statement, to use it to try to devalue the claim. You can give them the information about where your car is, and I do advise people to do that, definitely, because most insurance companies, if it's sitting in a tow lot, they want to try to minimize the cost. And if they have an idea that maybe we're at fault here, they will most of the time go get the car and move it into their lot somewhere so the fees aren't building up. On the other hand, if they feel that there is a question of liability, they won't move it, and then they expect you to what they call mitigate your damages. In other words, they expect you to go get the car out of the tow lot and pay $500, $1,000 and move the car out of there. When you negotiate with them later on, after they've accepted fault in the case, they will say, let's just say it's a total loss situation. often they will take the position, here's the value that we come up with, and we're going to pay you this value, but we're not going to pay you except for 2 days of the tow yard cost, because you should have moved the car out of there. And so you're responsible for that. That happens more often than not in a total loss situation. So that's why I said before, if you can avoid tow lots, do it. Call AAA, call whatever coverage you may have to try to get the vehicle towed to a service station where you know somebody or to your home. Medical bills, in addition to giving the medical insurance information to the paramedics, to the emergency room, to any doctors that you may have to go to, you have to be aware of, in accident situations, use of your health insurance and that med pay expense that I talked about. And here's a very good reason why you want to use that med pay expense under your auto policy. There are more and more insurance plans that state if you're in an accident and we pay for your medical bills. So typically you'll see this in union situations, a union employee. And if you get a recovery from somebody, then you got to pay us back what was paid out on those medical bills. So if your recovery is $10,000 and there's $6,000 in medical bills and you get a settlement for $10,000, you're thinking, great. However, then you get a letter from your health insurance company that says, give us the $6,000 back. They all, especially in the past couple of years, these insurance plans, many of them are claiming a right to be paid back because the plan says we have a right to be paid back. But that's not the law. There is a federal law called ERISA that if it is a true ERISA plan that has complied with all the federal requirements to be an ERISA plan, is entitled to be paid back. But I would say on probably more than 50% on the claims that I have now, I get a letter that says we need to be paid back. And I ask them, or I send a letter back and saying, show me that you've complied with ERISA, and there's all these things that you have to do to make sure they complied with ERISA. And 9 times out of 10, it is a collection company that's a national company that deals in all 50 states. And what they don't know is in Missouri, there is no right for what they call subrogation, unless you have an ERISA plan that has complied with the ERISA federal law requirements. So you could have a situation where you do have to pay back the medical insurance, the medical bills, but you may have that med pay expense on your auto policy to help you pay for that. There are many clients that we get to the end, and when I say the end, I mean we've gone through all the treatment, the medical bills, we've gathered the medical bills, we've gathered witness statements, whatever it may be, and we make a submission of a settlement package to the insurance company. And we just can't get enough money on the table to satisfy the client. Now, it's my job to do the best that I can to get the most money on the table so it satisfies the client. It doesn't always happen. And now we have a deciding point of what do we want to do here? Are we going to accept what's on the table, or are we going to proceed to litigation, file the lawsuit, and go through oftentimes 2 or 3 years in court? It's not unusual, even on smaller cases. What really helps determine whether you want to go through litigation is what you can do with all these medical bills. And these will usually be on a little bit larger cases. What helps is that to know in 30 years plus of doing this is that hospitals do want to get paid. Healthcare providers, they do want to get paid. everybody wants to get paid out of these situations, so you can always negotiate. You can always call providers and negotiate on that end to try to get them to bring their bills down. And you can also negotiate with the insurance adjuster. They don't want to go to litigation either. And when they say, this is all that I have on a case, I hear that quite a bit. Then I go work on the medical bills. I try to get those down as far as I can. And I talk to the client and let them know exactly what they're facing. Once we get down to the bottom numbers, so to speak, then I lay it all out for them. And if it's still not enough, then I go back to the adjuster. And I say, this is where we are. This is what I need to have to settle this case and see if we can make things work out. Litigation isn't fun. Nobody wants to be tied up in court for years on these things. So you have to make any effort that you can to reduce medical bills, to get as much money on the table as you can, and to have the client understand what the process is. And I do this from the first day that I meet the client. I let them know, this is what you're facing. I don't know what the numbers are at the very beginning, but what I see some attorneys do that I think is just not a good thing, and I don't like to speak bad about other attorneys at all. There's some in the room here, but some lawyers, I get people that come to me and say, well, I talked to this other lawyer and he says he can get me X. And I say to somebody who says that, well, if you want to have a specific number out of this case, if you're telling me that this is what you have to have out of the case, then I'm not your lawyer. I am not the lawyer who is going to take on a case like that. It's a problem from day one if somebody has that expectation. Nobody knows what the value of the case is when it walks in the door. And I have people that will call around because they're trying to find out the value of a case to see if they can settle it themselves, and that's okay. Everybody wants to try to get as much money as they can, but it's impossible to say at the very beginning what the value of a case is, or, oh, I'm going to get you $1 million out of this case. All you're doing is you're taking on a client that is going to be a problem from the very beginning and all the way through. You have to really use that knife, use that cell phone from the very beginning to document as much as you can to make sure that you tell the medical personnel about your problems because you want the proper treatment. Not just because there may be a situation where you need to collect money out of it. You want to be properly treated. You want to get better. You want to recover the lost wages that you may be facing. And believe me, for many, many people out there, even a week of lost wages is a huge thing for them. And they're not going to get that money back overnight. So I've covered most of what I wanted to cover there. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.